Of investigation into a secret government experiment that was carried out in St. Louis. Residents tell us they still remember a mysterious fog. Children would run through it. Mothers would try and close their windows against it. For decades, they all had questions, and now we're seeking answers. The United States Army now admits that it sprayed a chemical that contained cadmium, a known carcinogen, on a neighborhood of more than 10,000 people.
Conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. Make sure y'all smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed. This one right here is going to be an absolute banger. And if you just want to enjoy good vibes, good people, this is the channel to be on. But look, check this out though. This is good. This is going to put the icing on top of the goddamn cake, y'all. Y'all know a lot of the stuff that we talk about is actually true. You got to watch how you speak about these things on the internet. But man, what a time to be alive.
Missing Japanese citizens. One night in June 1978, a 22-year-old single mother of two kids named Yaiko Taguchi was working her usual shift in Tokyo, Japan's cabaret Hollywood. After finishing her shift right at around midnight, Yaiko left the cabaret through the front door and was never seen again. At first, nobody thought that anything serious had happened to Yaiko. In fact, several years later, her manager was questioned, and he claims that everyone thought she had quit when she failed to show up. At around that time, there had been rumors going around that several North Korean spies were working undercover in Japan looking to abduct innocent citizens and hold them as hostages back in North Korea. However, this was seen by the Japanese government as nothing more than a conspiracy theory that couldn't possibly be true. Sadly, the missing case of Yaiko went cold, and it wasn't until almost a decade later that a clue to her whereabouts emerged following a disturbing chain of events. In November 1987, as South Korea was preparing to host the Olympics in the capital city of Seoul, a Korean Airlines plane blew up in mid-air as it was flying over the Andaman Sea, taking the lives of 115 innocent people. During the investigation, it was revealed that two North Korean agents acting under direct orders from the North Korean government had planted a bomb in an overhead storage compartment before getting off at the first layover in Abu Dhabi. As the authorities were closing in on the two suspects, one of them took his life with a cyanide-laced cigarette, but the South Korean government was able to arrest the other agent responsible for the attack. During her interrogation, it was revealed that she had been training for that mission for 6 years, and that for 3 of them she had been paired with Yaiko Taguchi, who had taught her how to speak and act like a Japanese woman so she could fly under the radar. As it was later revealed, Yaiko wasn't the only woman who had been kidnapped by the North Korean government. As of today, 17 Japanese citizens have been officially confirmed by the Japanese government as having been abducted by North Korea from 1977 to 1983. Disturbingly, a lot of them were shamelessly kidnapped in the middle of the day and thrown on a boat to North Korea. You might think that the victims were involved in something shady that put them on the North Korean government's radar, but the investigations actually suggest that most of them were average citizens who just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. One woman was captured while she was walking to a knitting class, and 2 others were kidnapped on a vacation to Europe. Another one, a 13-year-old girl, was taken as she was walking back home from school. Some of these victims were kidnapped for identity theft purposes, while others, like Yaiko, were forcefully brought to North Korea to teach the Japanese language and culture to North Korean spies. After the kidnappings were confirmed beyond the shadow of a doubt, the North Korean government had no choice but to come forward and apologize, but they claimed that only 5 of the 17 kidnapping victims were still alive. Over the next few years, the North Korean government would send what they would claim to be the cremated remains of some of the deceased victims back to Japan. However, as DNA testing would quickly reveal, pretty much all of the remains were fake, leading the Japanese government to believe that many more of the kidnapping victims were still alive. To this day, the North Korean government has stuck to its story, claiming that there are only 13 kidnapping victims and that the ones who are still alive were sent back safely to Japan. Shockingly, while the Japanese government has officially confirmed 17 kidnappings, the list of potential victims suggests that the true number could be as high as 800. Sadly, given the current political situation, it's unlikely we'll ever see the full extent of these abductions, or see the North Korean government held truly accountable for its horrific crimes.
Now that's crazy. You're telling me that they only apologize for taking people in can't say the K word on here, can we? Getting them gone. They was getting them gone, and they gave a half-ass apology. No wonder why they don't get along. That shit's crazy.
Heart attack gun. Back in the 70s, a journalist named Seymour Hersh published an article in the New York Times in which he accused the CIA of several assassination attempts on both foreign and American politicians who they considered to be anti-war dissidents. Due to these allegations, the US Senate put the CIA under investigation for alleged covert action abuses, which resulted in the release of 14 reports on major abuses committed by the CIA, FBI, and NSA. The majority of the reports included accusations of crimes such as opening and resealing US citizens' private mail for several years and illegally surveilling Black Power activists. Although these claims are obviously pretty serious, they paled in comparison to one particular accusation, or conspiracy theory, which alleged that the CIA had developed a pistol that could fire a poison dart over 300 feet, take a person's life, and leave absolutely no trace as to the cause of death. As it was later revealed, this theory turned out to be true, and the development of the poison dart gun was just one part of the program called MK Naomi, through which the CIA had sought to develop weapons for biological warfare. In 1975, William Colby, the CIA director at the time, had to testify in front of the committee that was investigating the agency. During questioning, he claimed that the CIA had developed a host of biological weapons as part of a plan to eliminate German leaders during World War II, but that their research had continued until well after the war. He also mentioned that the poison dart gun was almost completely silent on account of the battery that was housed inside the handle, and that it had been specifically designed for the target to feel nothing more than a mosquito bite when the dart struck. Interestingly, the agency had used a specific shellfish toxin to make it impossible for anyone to know what the cause of death was, leading forensic pathologists to believe that the victim had suffered an inexplicable heart attack. It wouldn't help pathologists that the dart was designed to melt inside the body so that it only left a small red mark where it entered the victim. When asked if the heart attack gun, as it was nicknamed, was ever used on anyone, the director alleged that it had only been used for experiments and that there were no records of
I call cap. How many of y'all call him cap? That's absolutely, I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
actual use. As part of the
they was using that.
investigation, the CIA had to hand over the gun to the committee, and there are some pretty wild pictures of the committee members analyzing the gun as William Colby answers their questions about it. Normally you'd expect to see something like the heart attack gun in a spy movie, and it's pretty wild to think that if they hadn't put it under investigation, they would have probably gotten away with using it for who knows what purposes. It's also pretty crazy to think that if that's the kind of stuff they were developing back in the 70s, imagine the kind of technology they have their hands on now. Disturbingly, the hearing was the only time the heart attack gun was ever shown publicly, and to this day it remains unclear what happened to it after the investigation. Rogue waves. Sailors often get a reputation for making up stuff they claim to have seen during their time out at sea, and because there's no one there to refute their claims, they sometimes get away with some pretty tall tales. For centuries, sailors all around the world had talked about seeing monster waves on the open sea that would allegedly reach over 100 feet in height. In 1826, a French captain claimed that he had seen a 108-foot tall wave in the Indian Ocean. Even though he had 3 sailors with him who backed up his claims, when he came back to the mainland, he was publicly ridiculed by the scientific community, as it was widely believed that it was impossible for a wave to be higher than 30 feet tall. For a long while after that, dozens of people continued to claim sightings of these monstrous waves in the middle of the ocean, but with no real evidence other than eyewitness testimonies, the existence of these waves fell into the urban legend or conspiracy theory category. In the 80s and early 90s, the Dreogreacts platform was set up in the North Sea off the coast of Norway to extract natural gas. As part of the protocol that was carried out to see if the platform was stable enough to withstand the rough seas, a wave height recorder was installed on the platform. On New Year's Day in 1995, the sensor recorded an 84-foot tall wave, which served as the first real piece of evidence for the existence of rogue waves. After this incident, a lot of people started wondering how many of the sailors from previous centuries had been telling the truth. What's more disturbing than that is that there were probably hundreds of disappeared sailors from all around the world who had come across a rogue wave, also known as a monster wave or a freak wave. But because most people who encountered 100-foot tall rogue waves generally didn't live to tell the tale, their testimony went down into the depths of the ocean with them. Since the Dreogreacts wave of 1995, there's been a growing interest in rogue waves brewing in the scientific community. A few years ago, a professor at the Australian National University had estimated that at any given moment there are 10 rogue waves active in the world's oceans. As of today, a rogue wave is usually defined as a wave that is twice as large as the largest waves that come up in a particular area. And while the root cause of rogue waves continues to be investigated, it's generally accepted that these monster waves appear when two wave crests join together at the exact right time, resulting in a massive wave that can sink even the largest ships and oil rigs. Interestingly, it's also been discovered that rogue waves can take place in large lakes. In 1975, a freighter named the SS Edmund Fitzgerald sank in Lake Superior under some pretty mysterious circumstances, with a lot of people in the scientific community coming up with all kinds of hypotheses to explain the incident. It wasn't until several years later that the scientists started theorizing that the vessel could have fallen prey to a set of 3 consecutive killer rogue waves. A phenomenon referred to as the Three Sisters, in which the first wave destabilizes the ship, the second wave hits the ship's deck before it can stabilize again, and the third wave overloads the ship with more water than it can take on. If this were true, it could also provide an explanation for the mysterious sinking of other large ships in oceans around the world over the past few centuries, but this might be a bit more difficult to prove. Poisonous alcohol. In January 1920, the 18th Amendment to the US Constitution was successfully ratified, triggering a 13-year period known as Prohibition, during which the production, sale, and transportation of alcohol was made illegal. During this period, the government enforced some pretty strict measures to prevent bootlegging of alcohol, which made the alcohol black market flourish like crazy. It was pretty much a playground for the mafia, in which the government would raid one bar and another one would crop up in just a few days' time. While all of this was happening, there were some pretty messed up rumors floating around that the US government was taking extreme measures to make sure people weren't consuming alcohol. These included allegations that the government was intentionally poisoning alcohol to make people who consumed it sick. For a while, this remained something of a conspiracy theory, but things took a turn pretty quickly on New Year's Day 1927 when 41 people died from alcohol poisoning at New York's Bellevue Hospital. Disturbingly, the autopsies revealed that a lot of the victims had been drinking industrial methanol, otherwise known as wood alcohol, which can be fatal even at low doses. It turns out that the government had forced companies to denature industrial alcohol to make it undrinkable since 1906, which was far before Prohibition. But when the crackdown on alcohol started, the government ordered these companies to add quinine, methyl alcohol, and other toxic chemicals to discourage people from drinking it. The reasoning was that if black market dealers knew their alcohol had been poisoned, they wouldn't dare distribute it knowing how dangerous it would be for their customers to consume. I guess they forgot to factor in that the demand for alcohol at the time was absolutely insane, and that black market dealers didn't care who lived or died from consuming their product. It wasn't until December 1933, 6 years after the Bellevue incident, that the federal government finally toned down their abstinence from alcohol policies. But by then, thousands of Americans had already been poisoned with contaminated alcohol. Gorilla.
You gotta think that y'all think that slowed down since then. Come on, let's be honest. Is that still currently happening, just with other products? I'm betting yes.
Nowadays, there's really nothing too shocking about seeing a gorilla in a zoo or on TV, but there was once a time when gorillas were considered to be in the same category as the chupacabra, the Jersey Devil, Bigfoot, and the Loch Ness Monster. I was able to find that up until a couple of centuries ago, gorillas were considered cryptids, which are animals that are believed by some to exist somewhere in the wild, but whose existence has never been proven. With most of these creatures, alleged sightings often turn out to be hoaxes, but obviously in the case of gorillas, what were once just rumors turned out to be true. Western explorers wouldn't come across a gorilla until around the 1500s, when an English explorer named Andrew Battelle was captured by the Portuguese off the coast of West Africa. While he was held captive on the mainland, Battelle described these disturbing, giant, ape-like creatures that would occasionally prowl around his campfire, but because he had never seen a similar creature before, he described them more as monsters than as animals. Battelle's description sent the rest of the world into what we can only call a gorilla frenzy, with all kinds of rumors being spread about these allegedly bloodthirsty, dangerous creatures living in exotic parts of the world. Over the next couple hundred years, the buzz around gorillas grew as explorers in Africa sent back illustrations of gorillas to Europe, which were often given to royalty and emperors as rare gifts. If you were to ask any European back then what a gorilla was, they would have described it in a similar way to how we describe Bigfoot or the chupacabra nowadays. They were thought of more as mythical monsters than regular animals. It wasn't until over 200 years or so later that an American naturalist named Thomas S. Savage found a gorilla skull in 1847 during an expedition to Africa, which was the first piece of real proof for the existence of these animals. Naturally, this triggered a bunch of new expeditions to the area, and between 1855 and 1850,
I mean, proved it for him. I mean, I get it. Y'all knew to the lands and stuff.
1959, French explorer Paul Duchaillu confirmed the existence of gorillas and even brought some back dead. Just as Andrew Battelle before him, Paul Duchaillu also described gorillas as these savage, bloodthirsty creatures which stuck in the public mind for a long time. Around 15 years later, some German explorers brought back a baby gorilla from Africa to Liverpool, even putting up some towels on the ship so he could swing around and entertain himself on the long journey back. As you can probably imagine, as soon as the ship arrived back in Liverpool, people started flocking around the hotel where the gorilla was allegedly being kept to catch a glimpse of the once mythical creature.
See, I guess that's where the movie King Kong came from, right?
To the public's dismay, Pongo the gorilla wasn't the massive, violent monster they had thought, but rather a cute little 2-year-old gorilla who loved to play with dogs. A few years later in 1902, a German explorer named Robert von Beringe killed 2 mountain gorillas, which were huge in comparison to the baby gorilla that the previous German explorers had brought back. And that was really the first time the public was able to understand what a full-sized adult gorilla looked like. It's pretty crazy to think that at some point these animals that we now see as normal were once seen as legendary monsters. Interestingly, if you really look at the research, there are a ton of other animals that we now take for granted that were once brushed off as hoaxes, including kangaroos, platypuses, giant squids, and Komodo dragons. With so many of these myths turning out to be true, it really makes you wonder how many animals are out there that we have no idea even exist.
Just think about it. Like, so, how y'all feel about Bigfoot? How do y'all feel about werewolves? Stuff like that. Vampires and everything else. Those are arguably probably more intelligent, and if I was them, I would avoid us too. I'd avoid us too. We ghetto as hell, and we like to eat everything, so they might be on the menu next. You never know, bro, or they're gonna be in zoos. So, absolutely not.
Now to a News Nation exclusive investigation into a secret government experiment that was carried out in St. Louis. Residents tell us they still remember a mysterious fog. Children would run through it. Mothers would try and close their windows against it. For decades, they all had questions, and now we're seeking answers. The United States Army now admits that it sprayed a chemical that contained cadmium, a known carcinogen, on a neighborhood of more than 10,000 people. Critics say this was done with no warning and no consent. Well, tonight we return to the site of that demolished neighborhood and speak with former residents who believe the government turned them into human test subjects. Although the Army admits that the test happened, it is not admitted to harming the residents. News Nation's Natasha Zuvez investigates what was in the fog and why the truth may still be buried.
The fog drifted through the streets like a ghost.
That's exactly what it looked like, a thick fog.
It was summertime and it was hot. We would just run through it as fast as we could and try to just cool ourselves off. It stuck to you.
The spray was so foul as far as the odor. It made some of us have headaches, nausea, dizziness.
That's what I remember. It made me sick.
It wasn't the weather. It was an eerie smoke descending from rooftops, rolling from the backs of trucks.
Regular flatbed truck, but it had a big machine on the back. And it had a big nozzle that really sprayed a fog you couldn't even see through. It was that thick, and it really, we felt it as it would adhere to our skin. And as far as the guys on top of the buildings, they tried to portray them to us as maintenance workers. But we was like, what is a maintenance worker doing? And basically a hazmat suit. And they had masks and goggles.
In the 1950s and 60s, in secret, the U.S. Army sprayed zinc cadmium sulfide into the air of a St. Louis housing project, a largely black neighborhood called Pruitt-Igoe.
It was a lose-lose situation for us in Pruitt-Igoe. We were subjects. We were subjects.
Of course.
They didn't ask for our permission. We didn't.
Who else are they gonna spray? Who else are they gonna spray? Yeah, act like the Tuskegee like experiments and all that stuff didn't happen. Like, bruh. Wow. Absolutely wow.
Asked for them to spray us. My government used me like I was a guinea pig.
We're standing at where Pruitt-Igoe used to be here in St. Louis, and it's hard to believe more than 10,000 people used to live here. As we bring our drone up, you can see it's mostly just an empty lot now, overgrown with trees. This used to be filled with 33 high-rise buildings. It was all demolished in 1976. And according to the National Research Council, St. Louis was chosen for spraying experiments because it had similar characteristics to Soviet targets like Moscow in terms of population density and terrain and proximity to a river. The government now admits to a secretive series of Cold War tests, including one dubbed Large Area Coverage. More than 30 tests conducted across the U.S. and Canada, spraying zinc cadmium sulfide from planes, rooftops, and vehicles to simulate how a biological attack might spread, all to prepare for potential warfare against the Soviets.
Many of us been in the military and had top secret clearances. We know how it works.
We have died for America. We have fought for America.
You are a veteran.
I am United States Air Force veteran.
Dr. Starks, you're a veteran as well.
Same.
I'm an Air Force veteran also.
Is there a sense of betrayal here?
Definitely.
They want to know if those secret tests have anything to do.
I'm not even gonna lie to y'all. I ain't even gonna lie to y'all. I gotta get this off my chest. I don't feel a betrayal. I don't. Because I went into it knowing, I went into it feeling that this wasn't for me. A reason why I didn't retire or stay in. I had to experience it and see it for myself. I'm one of those people that got to get out there, get my feet wet, and experience it. That wasn't for me. That system wasn't built for me to thrive or to be in. It was to contain me and control me. And that's the way I felt the whole entire time. They let me get close enough to things without giving me things, if that makes sense to y'all. It's like I would perform very high, be in the like 1 percentile, you know what I'm saying? And I should be getting this promotion over these other people. I would deploy. I have more credentials, everything. People loved me, as I thought. And when it comes to like getting ranked up, they would pass me. Finds out, I get pulled to the side and they say, if you were a Mason, if you were a Freemason, if you would have did the ritual, then you would have got this promotion over these people. I knew that system wasn't for me, y'all. That's real talk.
With what they're observing with their own eyes.
I lost my 2 older siblings to cancer. I lost a brother last month.
I've been diagnosed recently with a rare form of lymphoma.
I had cancer of the left kidney, had partial removal of my left kidney.
News Nation reached out to the Army for answers. They provided a 1-page response. It says the Army's own Center for Health Promotion and Preventive Medicine investigated in 1994 and found inhalation exposure would not pose a health risk. They also cite later corroborating reviews, including a 1997 review by the National Research Council. Perhaps they assumed we wouldn't read the NRC's 380-page report, but we did, and the Army's statement doesn't show the full picture. In that 1997 review, the National Research Council explicitly says repeated exposure to zinc cadmium sulfide can cause kidney or bone toxicity or lung cancer if levels are high enough. And they admitted they couldn't fully assess the risk. Why? Because some Army records remain classified, it says, for national security reasons. More troubling, key Army exposure records were missing, and when the NRC asked the Army to supply them, the Army said it couldn't find them. Finally, the NRC considered conducting its own study, but concluded it wasn't feasible. In short, it did not test the site, collect samples, or test residents, and they didn't have access to all the data. Their review was based on what the Army gave them, and what the Army either could not find or withheld.
Why y'all think they ain't build nothing new there on that land, bro? They know it's contaminated. That wasn't a test. They just wanted to move those people up out of there. You know who lived there? People that look like me.
The Army ends its statement to
Happens
News
all the
Nation
time.
by saying, quote, none of the reports contained evidence of a radioactive component to the zinc cadmium sulfide dispersion tests. Residents say the secrecy and delays are no accident.
They're waiting us out.
They're waiting on all of us to die.
But that's not even the whole story, as residents demand to know what else could have been in that spray.
They have not come clean with what was in there.
Do you believe that it was just zinc cadmium sulfide in that spray?
No,
No.
We go to the source, a researcher who has spent decades declassifying government documents about these tests.
Do you believe the U.S. government sprayed some kind of radioactive material on the residents of St. Louis?
I believe that they did.
And the government's surprising response to our request to declassify information.
I mean, what the hell?
Plus, renowned activist Erin Brockovich weighs in.
Do you think there's been a lie here, a cover-up here?
It sure looks that way.
The residents are asking for an apology from the government for being experimented on. They are asking for compensation, for health studies for themselves and their children. They're also asking for transparency.
They don't want to give y'all black asses no money. That's real talk. That's real talk. They don't. They're gonna wait y'all out.
Want the government to release all the documents about the spraying. So, Elizabeth, tomorrow night on your show, we will go on a journey to try to declassify the one government document that a key researcher tells us she has never been able to expose. And we take the investigation to Erin Brockovich. For the residents still here, still fighting, the question is whether they will get any answers before it's too late. Elizabeth.
Well, they have a better chance of it with you on the case. Natasha Zuvez, thank you so much. In part one of our News Nation investigation last night, we uncovered a mysterious fog that once drifted through a St. Louis neighborhood, one that residents still remember decades later.
It made some of us have headaches, nausea, dizziness.
They didn't ask for our permission.
The government admits it sprayed a chemical that contained cadmium, a known carcinogen, critics say without warning and without consent. They sprayed it on a neighborhood of more than 10,000 people, but now years later, residents are getting sick, some with rare forms of cancer, and they're asking what else might be hidden from them. Specifically, what else could have been in that spray? News Nation's Natasha Zuvez picks up the investigation from here.
We're on our way to meet with a researcher right now who has dedicated her career, decades, to declassifying documents and trying to figure out what exactly happened here in the city of St. Louis and what exactly was in that spray.
Across the country, the government conducted secret Cold War experiments in plain sight.
It was so secretive that we're really just now sort of digging out from underneath us to try to understand the scale of it.
And Dr. Lisa Martino-Taylor helped uncover many of them.
We know that they were giving radioactive cocktails to pregnant women. We know that they were feeding radioactive oatmeal to children in state schools. They've admitted to those things, and they won't release the material related to St. Louis.
It's true. American children in state-run institutions like the Fernald School were fed radioactive oatmeal as part of studies by MIT sponsored by the Atomic Energy Commission. You can see some of the documents Dr. Martino-Taylor worked to gather and declassify on MIT letterhead describing experiments on human subjects. The children, some of them orphans, were told they'd be joining a science club. They were promised a quart of milk a day, a trip to a baseball game, to the beach. A copy of the 1994 congressional hearing shows those children, now grown, describing being told the oatmeal was just vitamins and recalling the health problems that followed: lumps on my arms, my stomach. Pregnant women were also unknowingly given radioactive iron at top hospitals in Tennessee and California to study how radiation crossed the placenta, some later reporting miscarriages, illness, or birth defects. A class action lawsuit resulted in a settlement in the 90s.
Do you believe the U.S. government sprayed some kind of radioactive material on the residents of St. Louis?
I believe that they did. There's so much contextual evidence that points that way, and I spent years looking at this.
She says her research reveals the men who designed and oversaw the St. Louis experiments were some of the top experts in radioactive weapons.
We know that the people who designed the study, who oversaw the study, these were all the radiological weapons experts who were looking at open-air radiological weapons.
One of them, Brigadier General William Creasy, was head of the Army Chemical Corps, the very branch leading America's secret radiological weapons program during the Cold War. He brought in a scientist named Philip Layton, who was the Army's leading authority on using radioactive particles in aerosol form, fog-like clouds designed to drift over enemy terrain.
So the very man who designed this spraying experiment in St. Louis was an expert in using radioactive fog against the enemy.
Yes, he was the expert. The expert.
Then she says there's the timing.
They were looking for a city to test their offensive weapons program. They wanted to do it. They expressed this in documents. St. Louis was their chosen city. That was their analog city to Moscow. And they wanted to do this in 1953. And they showed up in 1953 in St. Louis.
But there's one document Dr. Martino Taylor has never been able to unearth. It's still classified. The Joint Quarterly Reports detail the spraying experiments, all written by Layton himself. The last one is missing. It's called Joint Quarterly Report 5, and we tried to get it. Our team filed a Freedom of Information Act request on May 5th of 2025. By law, the government must respond to a FOIA within 20 working days, but it's been more than 3 months with multiple follow-ups.
Of course.
Nothing. The silence is what's called a constructive denial, and renowned activist Erin Brockovich says it reminds her of cases where the truth was hidden.
So, Erin, what is your reaction to this News Nation investigation? Did this shock even you?
Absolutely. I think my comment was, are we WTF the kidding me? I mean, what the hell? It's awful. I mean, the biggest thing, and I've learned in 30 years, is it's always the cover-up that enrages people, that hurts people. And I've learned that communities can handle the truth. What they don't handle and where they'll tip a scale is the lie. So this has been a cover-up, and I think that modern-day agencies owe it to them, the truth.
Do you think there's been a lie here, a cover-up here?
It sure looks that way.
Our investigation now drawing attention from lawmakers, including Congressman Wesley Bell of Missouri.
When American citizens have been impacted and exposed to chemicals specifically because of the federal government, I think that we should do, as Democrats and Republicans, we should all do the right thing, make certain to make these folks whole again, get them the compensation they deserve and the treatment that they need and also deserve.
It can happen to you. Don't get duped that it can't happen to you. We didn't think it was gonna happen to us. We was babies, kids. It can happen to you too.
Representative Bell is now fighting to get Pruitt-Igoe included in the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act that would provide payouts to Americans who can prove they were exposed to radiation during the Cold War. But for Pruitt-Igoe residents, there's a catch. Because key records remain classified, they haven't been able to prove what they were exposed to.
What do you want everyone to know about what happened here?
The truth. Whatever the truth is.
Loopholes, man.
The truth. I don't think we get it now.
In the meantime, residents say all they can do is wait, hoping someone finally listens.
When will you give up this fight?
Never. Till I'm cold and dead and buried in my grave.
So yeah, remember the video that I did like last year about the fog that reappeared? Do we think that it's the same fog that they're talking about happening to them? How many of y'all got similar stories too as well? I remember right before I turned 18, I got a letter, and they were sending out all these letters to give us compensation from being exposed to chemicals, right? Including lead, right? And they waited to send that shit to me until the day before I turned 18. The day before I turned 18, so therefore I couldn't return the paperwork signed and get compensation. Yeah. So I got experience with this type of thing. It's real talk. Real talk. Ask my mama. It's wild. I didn't get compensation because I turned 18. They will wait you out. But so, it's just wild, man. Like, they do not want to pay the money. But at the same time, man, we have to speak up. We have to speak up on these things. We got to stand on business. We got to stop letting them keep playing with us like that. We're not experiments. And yeah, man, it's just a sad situation to see that this continues. And this is right here just like a real dose of reality for people. You know? That's what they waiting for, bro. They waiting for you to be in that grave, and that's wild. That's our government that we're speaking of, y'all. Do y'all feel safe? That's why I say grow your own stuff. Protect your own stuff, because they don't have the best interests. Only the best interests of the few that they're being controlled by, y'all. That's real talk, man. But look, let me know how y'all feel about this video. I'll see y'all in the next one. We don't be capping over here. It's real rap. It's just the way that we have to tell these stories without being attacked. I gotta protect myself. Hopefully y'all out here protecting yourself. I'll see y'all in the next video. And like I always say, spread love, because there's too much hate in this world. Love you guys. I'll see you on the next video. And I'm out though. Bye.